Time is 8:06, and I want to go ahead and call this meeting to order.
Good evening. Council Member Alvarez? Council Member Dieguez is absent. Council Member Fernandez is absent. Council Member Rodriguez?
Present.
Council Member Ruano?
Present.
Vice Mayor Collazo?
Present.
Mayor Sid is absent. You have quorum, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, for the roll call. At this time, I'd like to ask our town attorney to lead us in a prayer and a moment of silence.
Heavenly Father, please help us make the right decisions today in the interests of the residents and the council and the administration in this case. Please bless us with knowledge and wisdom. Amen.
Amen. Please remain standing. I'd like to ask Councilwoman Morano to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. You may be seated. On to the order of business. Any deferrals, additions, or deletions? Should we just move the 3 new business items on our agenda?
I'll second that.
All in
Vice Mayor.
favor?
Aye.
Excellent. On to public comments.
Good evening. If there's anyone here in council chambers for public comments, you may approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. And I see virtually, we have, I believe, 2 participants. If you are via Zoom or if you called and you want to participate in public comments, please unmute yourself, state your name and address for the record. And welcome to the special call meeting.
Esperanza Reynolds.
Good evening, Ms. Reynolds.
8465 Menzies Terrace. We have been following the creation of the building ad hoc committee and the stated purpose since March of this year when the item was presented on the agenda. It was surprising to see property owners, contractors, engineers, and all those associated with an addition of a home on Rosewood that was completed without a permit. If at any time a department is reviewed, we applaud the effort. In fact, that should be done with a certain regularity to achieve excellence. But the problem is that most people think this effort was orchestrated. There had been many instances where property owners have come before the council with HOA approval letters, town permits, variances, violations, fine fees, but this case was different. Without a permit, no one knows what was done. Even if professionals did the job, there are no inspections or approvals, and if this job was challenged and allowed to proceed, then everyone will want the same end result. After so much work, when the building department ad hoc committee was about to conduct a forum, inviting the public to then submit recommendations to try to sunset now will appear as if there was a desire to remove building department officials, and once that is achieved, to find excuses and to conduct what amounts to be an audit. Why not complete it, conduct a forum with the public, allow recommendations to be presented to the council, and when the town hires new building officials or finds internal talent that can do the job, the mission, focus, and purpose is simple, and it will incorporate the recommendations. On July 8th, as originally suggested, let's go into the chambers, pad markers, and a facilitator, define the customer or customers, create a list, homeowners, HOA, developers, professionals, architects, engineer, review the forum, upload it through the building department webpage, categorize what those forms are, what they belong to, what customers should be completing it, document what are the steps of each, and create a flow chart. We vote for you to complete the end process review of one of the most important roles in our town, and that if the approval of projects that renovate or construct single-family homes, commercial properties, then we start anew. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. Madam Clerk, any additional public comments?
I see another participant, Dr. Juan Barek. If you're here for public comments, you may speak now, and welcome.
I have no comments. I was just participating. I thought it was tonight's blasting committee meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Barek. Yes, the Blasting Advisory Committee just finished, but thank you. Anyone in the public here wishing to speak, please do so now. I don't see any other participants in the screen.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'm going to jump through our agenda straight to the new business items. We have 3 new business items. I did not hear a motion on the order of business, but I guess assuming that Mayor Sid is not here and he has one of the items, I guess that item will either be deferred, or I don't know if we can combine it because it's very similar to Councilman Alvarez's item. So I'll entertain a motion to reopen the order of business, maybe combine both of those items. Is there-
Second to combine item 13A and B.
Okay, so we're combining items 13A and B. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you so much. The motion carries. On to items 13A and B, and I don't know if manager, everyone's had the privilege to read your email, which you sent out a little bit later in the day, but I think it might help us in the discussion of these items if you kind of highlight the email you just sent out.
Yeah, as has been our practice since the onset of COVID, we have tried as much as possible to let the science and data rule the day. I have stated recently that I felt that we were on the cusp, on the verge. It was happening, it was around the corner. And sure enough, we get data from the Miami-Dade Emergency Management Office, and they get part of that report from the Dade County Health Department. And it's data on a lot of different things: vaccination rates, infection rates, hospitalizations, et cetera. The one that I have been following and looking at every week, they send it to us once a week, has been the vaccination rates. Because I felt that that was going to be something that was going to be telling in allowing us more freedoms or more liberties. Sure enough, the report that was issued on Friday, I was not here, it was issued in the afternoon on Friday, so I didn't see it until this morning, indicated that the vaccination rate has gotten to the benchmark that we were hoping for, which was 70%. Now, in that 70%, a small fraction of it, about 18%, are still in the process. They've gotten the first shot of a 2-shot series. The majority are fully vaccinated, but the 70%, 70.1 now as of Friday's data, are now fully vaccinated, or are vaccinated, and I believe that it was now time to take the next step in our recovery, and I issued the order earlier today, removing all mask mandates for visitors to Town Hall. We still will place signage at the entrance recommending that those visitors that are not vaccinated, recommending that they wear facial covering, but not mandating it. Fully vaccinated town staff will be allowed, as we have been, not to have to wear masks indoors or outdoors. The non-vaccinated town staff will be expected to wear masks, but we will not, I think we've reached the safety zone now that we do not have to require proof of vaccination. So those are the key changes. Visitors to Town Hall will not be required to wear a facial covering, and we will not be asking for any kind of proof. We'll rely on staff truthfulness and on whether they're vaccinated or not. And I believe that this is the next step that we should take, and I issued this order to our staff earlier today.
Okay, Councilman Alvarez, I know you initiated the special call, and I know Councilwoman Rano has been a big champion of this issue as well. So I'll give you guys the floor first, and if there's still something that we need to discuss on the items, we'll discuss it at this time. But the floor is yours, Councilman Alvarez, followed by Councilwoman Rano.
Thank you, Vice. However, I still feel where this can be an implication where you're telling town staff that they shall be expected. I'm running on a trust, like our town attorney, public that can put us more at risk of I don't want the town of Miami Lakes to be implicated by certain decisions that are being made here that are not correct. With the word mandate or expected, should be optional. Across the board, the mask mandate should be optional.
Hold on. Ultimately, that's your decision, okay? The manager runs the building and things like that, he does. But the policy of doing this, I believe, sits with the council. It's not 100% clear, by the way. I'm not going to sit here and say it's perfect black and white. The way the charter is written, it talks about the manager having decisions over employees. You guys tell him this is a policy or whatever, but as far as a specific employee is concerned and everything else, it's the manager. Now, the issue of him telling the employees what to do and you setting the policy, it starts to get really gray. In the end, I do believe the council has policy, and you are the ones who set it. Now, saying that, I think what the manager's doing it's something that I could live with, let's put it that way, because he's telling you, for your own good, I'm expecting you to wear a mask. I'm expecting you. I'm not going to fire you. I'm not going to take a sanction against you. I'm not going to ask you for a vaccine passport. I'm not going to do anything like that. I expect you to wear a mask if you're not vaccinated. If you don't wear the mask, ultimately, that's up to you. But I expect you to do it, okay? He's not saying he's going to fire you. He's not saying he's going to take a sanction against you, and he's not saying that he's going to ask you for a vaccine passport. Before, the policy we had before this, I had serious concerns about, and I voiced those concerns. Now, if this is a proposed policy that he wants to enact, if you want to change it, that's fully up to you. I could live with this policy. This is the policy that a lot of cities have, and the county has. Other cities, to me, are completely overboard, and that's their problem and their issue. There's some cities that are still mandating that you wear masks and everything else, and they want to do that, that's fine. I'm not their lawyer. But here, if you don't like a policy and you want to set a policy in the council, you can do it. But as far as this is concerned, I'm not going to flip out over it. What was in place before, I had serious concerns about, especially with the case law, the orders for the governor, the impending statute that's coming up July 1st with a $5,000 fine per event. But that's kind of my opinion on where it stands. Ultimately, I believe this council sets the policy. And this policy, if you were to adopt it or if you're okay with it, I'm okay with it. There's, you know, you want to assure yourself that you have no problem at all, ever?
Councilman Alvarez, I'm going to give the floor to Councilwoman Morano unless you have any additional questions. Councilwoman Morano, you're recognized.
Vice Mayor, thank you very much. Before I go into discussion, I want to take a moment of personal privilege. Our legislative team in Tallahassee, I have made phone calls and I have received an enormous amount of support from Representatives Tom Fabrizio and Alex Rizzo, from Senator Manny Diaz Jr., from Senator Rene Garcia, our current commissioner. They have been an enormous support. I voiced my concerns at our last meeting, and I was very adamant about how I felt about this mandate. And as I took it upon myself to reach out to our legislative team, they are very close to the governor, and they understand. Per his order, they understand what his wishes are. The state of Florida is an example for the entire country to follow with regards to business openings, the elimination of emergency orders, the elimination of mask mandates, the returning to normal that everyone so desires. That is the desire of Governor DeSantis, and it is the desire of our legislative team in Tallahassee. So before I go into any discussion, I wanted to thank them enormously for the support that they have extended my way, and I want to thank Councilmember Alvarez for finding this to be so important to call a special call meeting. I think that this is of the utmost importance, and I truly appreciate your support for my item and for my efforts. That being said, walking through this, there's a couple of things in the email that I took a look at just a little bit ago. The removing of mask mandates for visitors in town facilities, I was under the impression through the chair to the attorney, I was under the impression that we had already done that we had already removed the mask mandates for visitors in the building.
For public meetings, it had been removed because we can't deny access. For routine business, it was still a
So this is for visitors that are entering one of our departments to meet with.
As of last Friday, if you were coming into the building and you weren't coming to a public meeting, you were required to wear a mask. That has been removed.
I believe that per the governor's orders, masks were not allowed to be mandated in government facilities. So we did not have a mask mandate in this building as of last week. We had the previous meeting when the governor, when we had the governor's order that he extended, masks were not allowed to be mandated in any government building. So I think that we were already there. That's why I don't quite understand this.
No, we weren't there.
Did we not vote on that as a council? To remove the mask mandate for visitors and for individuals in this chamber?
To be quite honest with you, Councilwoman Morano, I thought the purpose of this meeting is to clarify all these issues that we're talking about today. And I think that's why it's so timely. Because
well, it was very clear to me that we removed the mask mandate not only in this building, but in all of our recreational facilities. We opened it up to be rented for parties. We removed the mask mandate at any of our pavilions and at the Mary Collins Community Center at Robert Alonso. I just want to make sure that when I vote on things on this day is that we're all understanding what we're voting on. We made it very clear that masks were not mandated in this building or any other one of our facilities.
All I can tell you is as of last Friday, if you wanted to walk in this building, you were expected to wear a mask.
I think that you're mistaken. I would like to revisit that because that was the governor's order and
I'm
that's
not-
what we voted
hold-
on.
I'm not saying that what you voted on or didn't vote on. I'm just telling you what the rule that was in effect in this building until last week was.
But we voted to have that rule removed per the governor's orders.
Fair
So
enough.
there's a miscommunication somewhere between what we vote on this dais and what translates down to staff.
If you look at the recordings of the meeting, the first item that was addressed up here by this council and voted on was the issue of public meetings, going back to normal, right? And I'm actually the one who brought it before you to ask
Absolutely.
you, right? So we decided at that point, we were gonna have back to normal council meetings, and we talked about the difference between a public meeting and routine business. And in fact, I think it was either the mayor or the vice mayor talked about routine business, and you left, this council left, the mask mandate in place for routine business.
Well, we even discussed the fact that if someone didn't want to wear a mask, that we had to accommodate them, that staff would have to meet outdoors, that staff would have to meet in a place where they could social distance, because we could not mandate that anyone that walked into this building had to wear a mask.
That's, I don't believe, and I'm no attorney, but I don't believe that the governor's mandate removed the ability for a property owner in their own property.
It did. In a government building, it did. I actually have the governor's order with me.
Okay.
And I don't know if Lorenzo has it, but I know that.
I can tell you, the mask mandate got removed in this building based on discussions that we had last week.
Say that again?
The mask mandate got removed based on discussions that we had last week, the manager and I.
The mask mandate in this building.
And the reason I discussed it with the manager, and we discussed it at length over several days, and the mask mandate was removed in this building.
Councilwoman, if I can
Yes.
elaborate a little bit more.
Please.
Okay. When we met back in May, okay, this was discussed, and I have the minutes here of what was approved.
It was on the heels of the governor's order, which
Yes.
was issued
So-
on May 3rd.
So let me explain what that order did. Okay, that order, there was two. There was 21-101 and 21-102. Okay? 102, and it was a little backwards. 102 suspended, 101 said that effective July 1st, they were no longer valid, which were the emergency orders. Okay. It doesn't discuss anything about masks, but the fact is that most mask mandates throughout the
Were
county and
emergency
throughout the
orders.
town were based on emergency orders. There was a bit of confusion at the time, which at this point, we no longer feel it's confusing, with regards to what can we, as a town, for normal business operations, is there a distinction, is there not a distinction?
Hold
And
on
at
a
the end,
second.
we don't believe so. But
Look, let
what's-
me get it to the point. Okay, let's stop dancing
But
around.
there is a vote,
No,
there
but
was a
the-
vote.
but this-
Well,
but this is
I
a
want to
ve-
say what the vote was on, though, because I think this is important.
This is a very important
So,
point, because
regarding visitor access to town hall, there was a motion by Vice Mayor Collazo that routine business with town staff, that facial coverings be required in the building, and that motion was approved by this body. So-
Required or
Required.
recommended?
No, required. It's here, I'm reading the minutes. So it was required. And that is that was a decision that you, as a body, at that point in time, based on that information, provided.
When was that?
This was at the May meeting.
And part of that conversation was exactly what Councilwoman Rano said, that we would also accommodate somebody
Absolutely,
if they
you
were,
have to.
if they were coming in and did not have it. And I remember
which is why-
the context of it
And
was to
that's ADA
protect,
law.
to protect staff.
Yes. Right,
And I
which is
think that
why-
was the
Yeah,
underlying.
absolutely.
And regardless of
That's
the.
reasonable accommodation, you have to do that.
Regardless of the word that's there, as far as I was concerned, the accommodation was because we could not require, we could not remove you from the building for not wearing a mask. As a government, we are required to service you whether or not you want to wear a mask. So that was my interpretation. Perhaps the motion says required, and I interpreted recommended. Bottom line is that no one could be removed from this building for not wearing a mask. They had to be serviced. That's the way that I understood it. So to me, this was, at least for me, this had already passed. Moving on to what Councilmember Alvarez was saying about wearing masks, about masks being optional. In lieu of the ruling that we have from the First District Court of Appeals, and I read it, it's a long read, but there's a lot of very interesting components about a person having a right on what they are to do with their own body. It's in the Constitution, it's in the state constitution, and in this ruling it says it over and over and over again that every human being of adult years and sound mind should have a right to determine what shall be done with his or her own body. It goes on and on and on with regards to that. That was my argument in our last meeting, that this should be recommended. I have the numbers. I know that the manager gave us the numbers, that we reached 70%. As part of the memo, it says that this is what President Biden had said that we should reach by July the 4th. To me, it's an arbitrary number. 70% could be 71, could be 69, could be 72. It's an arbitrary number. So I don't go based on these numbers. As of the last meeting that we had, there was, I think, 1.6 million people vaccinated. Now we're at 1.7. I understand that this is what's being used here to determine that things have changed. I think that we could have very easily reached this at our last meeting. I think that we could have found a compromise. Ultimately, I didn't have the support of the council, so it didn't make a difference. Moving on, to me, mask wearing in this building should be optional. It is optional everywhere else. I don't feel the need for us to force anyone to wear a mask at this point. We have sufficient vaccinations. There was something said about herd immunity a while back. That kind of was gone with the wind. Herd immunity was, at the beginning of the pandemic, it was what we were supposed to reach. Now nobody talks about herd immunity. Bottom line is that the liberties and the freedoms that we deserve as residents of the town of Miami Lakes are being infringed upon. Our staff members are just like residents. There should be no freedom that we have as council members, or that a resident walking through the door has, that one of my staff members should not have. So I think that it is in our discretion as an elected body to, Councilmember Alvarez said, we can pass whatever ruling we want on the procedures that we would like the manager to follow with regards to the staff. That is what I tried to do last week. I think that, it was met with a little bit of resistance that I still don't understand, because the majority of us here are conservative council members. We follow a conservative platform. We knock on doors, and we have a conservative message to give to our residents. And when we sit on this dais, we should continue to deliver that conservative message. It cannot be a bait and switch. When you run for office and you promise something to your constituency, when you sit on the dais, even though these are nonpartisan races, everyone whose door you knock on, they ask you, what is your party affiliation? What are your values? What are your beliefs? When liberty and freedom is at stake, will you have my back? My answer to the residents when I knocked on the door is yes. I am a conservative member of this community, and I will have your back. And so that's what I tried to do last month. I'm very grateful that Councilmember Alvarez called for this meeting and that we're discussing this again. To me, I would like to change this to optional. Obviously, vaccine information should never have been requested, so I'm okay with that, but I would like to make the mask optional and not
So there's a
recommended.
motion by Councilwoman Morano to amend the policy drafted by the manager to make the mask optional.
All right,
Is this-
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
there's been a second. All right. Let me tell you what the law is on this stuff. Making people wear a mask is a violation of their right to privacy. You have a right either to put on a mask or not put on a mask, but for government to compel you to do it is a violation of your right to privacy. That first DCA case says it. There's another fourth DCA case that came out earlier than the first DCA case. The fourth DCA case was during the pandemic, when there were emergency orders pending. That case, and I forgot what the name of the case is, that case provided that essentially, because there is a pandemic, these emergency orders were something that passes what, constitutional muster, meaning the strict scrutiny test, etc. The first DCA case came out next. The problem that case had is that basically all the emergency orders are done. So the first DCA case certified conflict with the fourth DCA, not because the masks weren't a right to privacy, but it's the test that the government is supposed to apply. It's a technical argument, but for our purposes, making people wear a mask by government is an invasion of their right to privacy. The governor also issued orders that says you can't ask people for a vaccine passport. Can't require that they show you a vaccine passport. So the policy that we had in place before, although well-placed and makes some logical sense, was, hey, look, if you show me you don't have a vaccine, if you show me a vaccine passport, you don't have to have a mask. It makes logical sense. The manager's trying to protect employees. I get it. But unfortunately, that policy would run afoul of the law and the governor's order and the statute that's going into place on July 1st. The sentiment is well placed. There's no one can fault the man because of what he's trying to accomplish. He's trying to have a safe workplace. I get it, but it's in violation of the law. So we discussed this quite a bit over the last 4 days, extensively. And the manager came up with this policy. Like I told you earlier, he's expecting you to wear the mask. He's not telling you you have to do it, but he's expecting you to do it. He's not asking you for a passport. He's not asking you for anything. And if you don't wear it and you haven't had the vaccine, he's not going to take a sanction against you. I understand. I'm as conservative as the next guy. I don't get to make policy or even opine on it. Only its legality or illegality. That's as far as I'm going to go. But if you want to, this policy, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it runs completely afoul of the law. Now, if you want to take a different position, that's your job and your prerogatives. I'm hoping I explained myself and the rationale and how we got to where we are. But in the end, the buck stops here, so to speak.
And I appreciate that because
Right.
the buck does stop here. We set the policy, and then the directives are to be followed, and I think that was maybe the message that was missing last week, perhaps, right? That we weren't under the impression of what we could do with staff or not do with staff.
By the way, and one last thing, this is not something that is clear. You just look somewhere, and this has evolved, and very, very quickly. I mean, CDC guidelines are changing. OSHA guidelines are changing. I mean, this is not something que se cae de la mata, that falls off the tree. It is stuff that is ongoing, developing, and daily. I mean, I think OSHA's guidelines were in the last 8 days or something like that? Yeah, I mean, so it's not like the man's been doing something that's completely foreign to us or anything like that and that no one else would do. That's not. And the other problem is that some of my colleagues, and this is when I was about to interrupt Lorenzo, some of my colleagues have taken the position that because we're property owners or we're a business, that somehow that changes everything. I vehemently disagree with them. And most of them have not been able to legally back that process up. But unfortunately, that set us back in our thinking, in the manager's thinking, because they got together at some of these Florida League of Cities or Miami-Dade League of Cities meetings and started coming up with all of these interpretations to try and get around the governor's mandates and the governor's executive orders and his repeal of those. And that's what started this whole train rolling on whether we're a property, whether we're acting as a business, whether we're acting as this. That's the problem, and that's where it all started. And it's gotten, and then it's taken a whole lot of thinking and talking to get to here. And boy, am I freezing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gastesi. Before I go back to Councilman Alvarez, and I do want to give you the floor to maybe wrap this up, I do want to ask a couple questions. You know, and again, every time that we have debate up here, I love it because we all bring a very unique perspective. You know, and I admire, you know, whether you're an attorney, an educator, in the finance world, I admire all of our perspectives. I come from the world of healthcare, right? So maybe I've been a little bit more sensitive than most on the issuance of masks because I still have to wear masks. And in every CDC guidelines, you see that healthcare facilities are treated very differently. Why? Because there's still a virus that's very, very dangerous. And in healthcare settings, you seem to be exposed or at greater risk. So I have a sensitivity to that. Realizing that, you know, the vaccines are a game changer and that we're now at those levels of herd immunity and realizing that we were very, very close maybe when you tried to do this at the last meeting. What is the difference between what Councilwoman Rano is suggesting and what the manager is suggesting now? I really don't see, I don't know if we're splitting hairs or it seems like it seems like we're all in agreement. I don't know what we're debating. I understand the constitutional, I understand the, you know, the principle part of it. I understand the practical application, but what I'm going through here, I am removing all mask mandates. I think we all agree that we are all okay with that. Fully vaccinated individuals in town hall can be without a mask, as directed by the CDC. I think we're all in agreement with that. So what are we changing? The word expected to recommended?
That is
Okay.
Councilman
Shall
Ruano's.
be expected to recommended? Is that?
Well, hold on. The manager,
Shall be optional, okay. And no proof of vaccination, I think we're all agreed. Okay, so just that slight verbiage, is that correct? That's the only thing that's on the table right now. Okay, back to Councilman Alvarez. So, shall be optional or recommended? Shall be optional. I think
The proper language would be town staff shall have the option to wear masks indoors. That's how it should be worded. If what you guys are asking for. I mean, I think it's irrelevant because the top one says fully vaccinated don't have to wear it. I mean, they can still wear it if they want to, but
It should just read, all staff members shall have the option to wear a mask if they choose to, which, I mean, everywhere the option is always available.
any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. There was a couple other items.
oh, we have to take up the second part, right? Is that what you're going to?
There was a bunch
Yeah.
of different things that were included in that new business item. It includes getting an opinion from the Attorney General's office. Is any of that, Councilman Alvarez or Councilwoman Rano, any of that still on your relevant? I have a question to the town attorney. Mr. Attorney, are there any other concerns with these changes that we've made with regards to OSHA or any other, do we run afoul of anything in your radar? Is there anything that you're concerned with the changes we made?
OSHA said it was only recommended, but it wasn't mandatory.
That's correct, Mr. Gastesi. There's nothing in federal law that mandates or that would be in conflict. OSHA just provides, as Mr. Gastesi said, recommendations of what we're supposed to follow.
When we were here the last time, it was not, it was mandatory by OSHA, which was my concern. You know, which mandatory are we going to follow? Mandatory from OSHA or the governor saying no? You know, we were caught in a quandary. I don't believe we are anymore as far as federal law is concerned.
Thank you. Hearing no other items, hearing no other concerns on this item, I'm going to move on. But prior to doing so, I am going to take a moment of personal privilege. Like I said before, I've had the pleasure of appreciating everybody's expertise that they bring to the table. And like I said, I come from the healthcare world, which is completely different than maybe some of these policies that we've been setting. We still have to wear masks in our buildings, and I think that landscape's forever changed. But not so much in his defense, but one of the things that I have found challenging through this, I have changed my infection control policy maybe 8 times through this pandemic, all based on ever-changing CDC guidelines, CDC recommendations, and it's an arduous task. Not just for an organization of this size, but for any healthcare organization, it's been very challenging. So I always believed, that we've always, not just as an elected body, but I believe that managers always tried to do what we know best, right? Which is try to keep people from getting sick. And I think that's really has always been the underlying issue behind it. I've always appreciated the conviction that we brought forward to this item, especially when we talk about the principles, right? The philosophy of our rights. And I've always admired Councilwoman Morano's tenacity on this issue. And I'm glad that we as a body, as the manager, have now come together on this issue, and I think it's time for us to move on. So I just want to thank my colleagues. Thank you, Councilman Alvarez, for bringing it forward, and Councilwoman Morano as well. So thank you both. Councilman Rodriguez, on to your item.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Okay, since all of us are aware, there's been some changes in the building department, and in light of those changes, and given that the success of the building department ad hoc committee depends on the communication and collaboration with the building department, I am making a motion to postpone the building department ad hoc committee for a period of either 45 or 60 days to allow for Mr. Rivas and Mr. Danny Angel to, reconsolidate their views of the building department and see what we can do. I personally believe that the building ad hoc committee had touched on some very important things that would absolutely help the building department moving forward. I've spoken to some members of the committee, and they feel it would be best to take a small hiatus, give you guys a chance to organize yourselves, and then we can reconvene, catch you up to speed on what the committee has been discussing, and then we can have them bring their recommendations after that. So it's basically postpone it for 45, let's do 60 days, and then we'll reconvene and finish up the committee's purpose.
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion on this issue?
Vice Mayor,
Yes, Councilman Alvarez, you're
I
recognized.
just want clarification from the manager. So there's a position that was created that didn't exist before in the staffing, the hiring process that you created for the building department. So my question is,
No
this
new position was created. It was a
so
redistribution of
Danny's
duties.
the building director, and then the person under him, that position didn't exist before, or it did?
Before, our structure had both roles of the building director and building official in the same person. And then we had a chief building inspector that handled most of the plans review and those kind of things. Now we're going to have one person, the building director, who will handle the operational administrative roles, and one person who will be the building official, who will also be the chief building inspector.
Okay.
No new body, no new position. It's a redistribution of duties.
Okay, I was just curious because I know we're tasked with the budget now, so are you adding additional staffing and a salary to the budget? And my other question is that you had created a position for Jeremy, and now that had to do with, you know, making sure that council meetings were ready following CDC guidelines and all that stuff. So my question to you is that position that was created for Jeremy, and since he's now taking the position of the Director of Parks and Recreation, will that position be eliminated from a staffing standpoint? So when we get ready to prep our budget, I want to just kind of, I want you to walk us through, like, all right, so this staffing plan that has come up with, will this increase our staffing budget for the town of Miami Lakes? Will it decrease it? Are we eliminating Jeremy's prior position? Because I mean, I don't think for Jeremy's position it needs to be replaced. I think that's something that you should just wash off. And I think some of the responsibilities that he had taken before with special projects can be delegated to other town staff members. So just walk us through that. I know I don't know if you guys thought of that. I was just, when I saw this, I'm like,
Yeah.
from a staffing standpoint, you know, this going to increase our budget with additional positions and salaries and
Yeah.
fringes.
As I stated a second ago, no new positions are being created. It's a redistribution of roles and functions. No new position in the building department is being created. Jeremy's position was not created for Jeremy. Jeremy's position, the majority of the duties there were handled by Jimena before she left the town. So it was also redistribute. The number of bodies, the number of seats did not change with any of those moves or any of those things. So Jeremy's position is incredibly diverse, or Jeremy's current position is incredibly diverse, and it's absolutely necessary, and I plan 100% to fill that spot. Because that position handles emergency management, it handles the neighborhood service districts, it handles operational things for the Parks Department, it handles the school crossing guards. So it's a position that needs to be filled. Any one of those roles individually probably don't constitute a position, but that's why we consolidated them all into one position, and that's the role that Jeremy's been fulfilling since he was appointed to that spot. So it's not one that we can do away with, and there's going to be a price to pay. Operationally, you know, the organization will suffer if we do not fill that position.
So under the new restructuring, is there going to be an increase in our budget and salaries?
No, it should be net neutral.
Thank you, Councilman Alvarez. Any further discussion on this? Councilwoman Morano.
I have a question through the chair to the manager. The ad hoc committee, what was the original sunset date supposed to be?
The end of July.
Okay, so let's say July 31st.
I don't remember.
I'm sorry, it was supposed to come with recommendations at the August meeting.
Okay, so, and they have been having meetings, and they have been, I guess, putting together their recommendations. Ultimately, we're going to need a new building official. It is what it is. We're going to need a licensed building official. I know that we're kind of patching holes.
We have one. I appointed Angel Rivas to be the.
And Angel Rivas is going to be our building official moving forward. We're not going to be putting this out to a hiring process again, or.
No, he'll be the building official till further notice until he's got a couple years before he retires. I mean, he'll be the building official unless he decides to go off somewhere.
Okay, so we're not going to be hiring anybody new, and Mr. Rivas has been there from before. I don't see the need to extend. I know that things have been moving quickly, and that there's been a lot of moves that we are unhappy with. I am particularly unhappy with everything that has transpired in the building department, and I don't see the need for the committee to be around any longer. In my opinion, it has created enough damage already, and I know that that was not the intended purpose, but I think that a lot of the unhappiness of some of the staff members that are no longer with us or that are going to be moving on to other places, and some of the staff members that are currently in the building department, this whole process has been one that has taken a strain on the department as a whole. So I'm not in favor of prolonging this any further. I think that we should keep the sunset as it is, let them put forth their recommendations. There's no need for them to stop meeting. The changes in the building department don't change the procedures. It is what it is. The procedures are what they are. They've been that way for a long time, so that there's recommendations for them to put forward. They should do so by the sunset date. I would hate for this to continue to drag on. It's something that has, left a bad taste, at least in my mouth, and I'm ready to see it end. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilman Rodriguez.
Thank you, sir. The recommendation to suspend was merely to give Mr. Angel and Mr. Rivas a chance to catch up with their new positions. Even though they've been here, they've been in different positions. So it was also a recommendation of several of the committee members that they would like to wait. Mr. Mesa and Mrs. Fernandez, Mrs. Rodriguez were very present at the meetings. They gave great input on items that I think are very important and should be addressed. I'd also hope that Mr. Rivas and Mr. Angel will be as involved, because the committee requires it, and really in order for the committee to be successful, they obviously need to collaborate with the building officials. So I think it would not hurt to give them some time. I think they would appreciate the time to get their bearings in order not to just be thrown into this committee meeting. The committee has actually started to meet 2 times a month, which is very good. They're doing a lot of good work. They're identifying a lot of important issues. So I just thought it would be a good idea to give them a little bit of time to have Mr. Rivas and Mr. Angel get their bearings, and then we can reconvene and get back to business.
Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. Any further discussion on this item? I do have some remarks. I participated in some of the meetings, but I do share kind of the similar sentiment to Councilwoman Morano. We've lost a wealth of knowledge from this process. I'm not going to say it's based on the committee or the recommendations. I just know that it's been something that's taken a toll on our community. With that being said, I'd like to see what recommendations they have coming forward. I know that they've been working on something. I don't think 2 individuals, I think the department would appreciate whatever's going to come forward. And I just don't want to run the risk of there continuing to be more shakeups or anything else from this process. So if they've come forward with recommendations, love to see what they are. And then if we can have the committee, if there's still issues pending, there's nothing that keeps us from revitalizing the committee and bringing it back forward. So I see there being more value in adopting the recommendations, seeing what they have, and then if there's additional issues outstanding, take them up at that time. So I sit with Councilwoman Rano on this issue, and just like to see what the recommendations are, have them adopted as quickly as possible, have the new building official and the new department head kind of take ownership of the department, and then if we need to revisit the issue, then so do at that time.
All right.
Councilman Rodriguez?
Yeah, that's fine. We can do, if you guys want to vote that way. But don't sit here and assume that these people resigned because of the committee. They never said that. They were involved in the process. We made sure that they were involved in the process. They gave recommendations. So for you guys to sit here and say, this committee caused all this drama, it didn't. If they resigned, it was because of their choice. This had nothing to do with the committee. So I just want to make that
Councilman
very
Rodriguez,
clear.
I retract my comments. You're absolutely right. These individuals had never really stated on the record why they resigned, and that would be completely up to them, and that was not fair of me, so I retract my comments. You're absolutely right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye.
Aye.
The motion fails.
What was the vote? What was the vote? 2?
2-2.
2-2, the motion fails. They're looking forward to, I guess, the building committee's recommendations.
Hold on, but for the record, the clerk and I want to know who voted how. We don't know.
Aye. I voted
Councilman
in favor.
Alvarez in favor, Councilman Rodriguez in favor, Councilwoman Morano and myself against.
So they'll continue to meet, and they'll come back to us in August.
Correct. And I think as part of the discussion, some of the things that we added onto the record was after their recommendations are made, if there's still an opportunity for them to continue, then we can revitalize or re-look at that committee and see if there's still some work to do. There is no further items on this agenda. Absent any further items, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Wait.
Oh, I'm
Vice
sorry.
Mayor,
I'm sorry, there's an attorney's report. I apologize.
Right. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I promise
Go
it'll be
ahead.
quick. I'd like for you guys to think about, and by the way, when I say you guys, I mean collectively, colloquially, whatever. I want you guys to think about your rule on waiving the rule when items are not added to the agenda timely. You pretty much have been doing it as a courtesy to your colleagues, and that's okay. But when you look at the actual rule, it has a requirement within it that it be an emergency. So it seems to me like your course of conduct is, almost like you want to do it, out of cooperation or, just respect for your colleagues. And that's fine if that's how you want to go forward. Or if you don't, then follow the rule that says emergency, or the third option is just do what you've been doing, leaving the rules say emergency, but doing it, through your course of conduct. But I need to bring that to your attention, that the rule says one of the requirements is an emergency.
I think like many of the other rules that we have, we waive them on collegiality.
Right.
And I remember that there was times where the vice mayor and the mayor of councils before would actually really be sticklers for the rules and would actually deny items, right, being placed on the agenda. That hasn't been what I've seen since I've been serving. There's a new culture here. Should we revisit the rule or continue to waive it? I don't know. I guess that's a good discussion.
Right.
But I know last time we tried to look at one of these rules that there really wasn't a lot of appetite for change, right?
Right.
And you know what? The reality is, I think we've talked about intellectual consistency here, and I think that's what we're trying to be, right? So, and I think that's what we're gunning for. But the reality is, I don't see Councilman Rodriguez put something on there, and because it didn't come in at a certain time, I'm not gonna pull that card,
Can I suggest we redraft the rule for the next meeting for you guys to look at it?
Yeah,
And
I mean,
take
if
the
you guys
emergency
have
part out?
suggestions, it's just a different culture. This is just like policy that we talked about, right? As guidance changes, what's happened here is the culture has changed on the council. And since the culture has changed, there's
100%.
collegiality, and those are our rules to do with as we please. So if you have a suggestion that might better serve the culture of this council, I don't mind listening
Yeah,
to it.
I'd like there to be a rule in place that's followed, not a rule in place that we're going to ignore. That concerns me usually.
Councilwoman Morano.
If I may address, through the chair, if I may address the clerk, typically, are the items not presented on time because of the time of the day or because of the day that they're due? I know that recently we moved the deadline to noon instead of the end of the business day. I know that for myself, that puts strain on me because once I kind of walk into the office in the morning, sometimes I get bombarded with a million different things, and I blink and it's noon. Sometimes I'm sending them to you at 11:45 in the morning. I don't remember why we switched it to noon, and does that affect it at all, or are they just
No.
presenting them a few days later?
No,
or-
actually, my input, my idea, or my opinion would be that all of you are presenting them reasonably. That you all complied every so often. Some of you, yeah, something happens during the weekend and they get some news or residents reach out to them. So Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday before the agenda is being generated, it's when you present it, and we consider that late. So that's why we include that waiver. But no, the vast majority of you always comply, and I don't find an issue with the noon I don't think so. That has not changed. It's always been, in my 9 years, I've had previous council members that always presented items late. What Vice Mayor Collazo is referring to, I vividly remember. Previous council members were a little bit more by the book. Some more than others were very stickler to being in compliance, and it would bother them. So they would always say, no, set the alarm. We all have the same 24 hours in a day, so work on your item, days before. And it was respected, but the climate has changed. You're more lenient. I don't see an increase. I think it's always, I think it has to do with residents reaching out to council members during the weekend, or news, like it just happened with the LPR of Council Member Fernandez. He became aware of that after the incident. It was after the deadline. So I don't think it's the time.
Okay, well, I echo the Vice Mayor. I can't imagine a moment where I would deny my colleague an opportunity to present an item, just because there's a rule. I think that we're very collegial on this council, and I appreciate it from my colleagues, so I would definitely extend it. It doesn't bother me that the items are late. I just know that sometimes for staff, for you as our clerk, sometimes it presents a little bit of a problem, but at least for me as a council member, I'd be okay.
What I understand from the attorneys, I had spoken, Lorenzo had spoken to me, and I just heard Town Attorney Gastesi, maybe what we could do to be more specific, define better the special rules of order, maybe add a section for cases like what we experience, late items, but not necessarily they're urgent. They're not an emergency. Just state it, just define it better.
Yeah, either that or take the word emergency out, which is probably what I'm going to do. It doesn't have to be an emergency, because that's the part that concerns me, because some of the stuff that's being presented is late, but it's not an emergency. I would like to have seen the item on the agenda and voted upon and everything else, but it would not meet that emergency requirement. So I'm probably just going to take out the word emergency, frankly.
And Vice Mayor and council members, I also see this as an opportunity for all of you. This should be a brainstorming opportunity for any clause that you think we can improve. Because special rules of order have been around for at least 15 years. I don't think from the beginning, but I think they got enacted like 5 or 6 years into us as a town. And it's a document that should be revised. We revise a lot the committee rules, and I think it was a good exercise. We just updated them, I believe, in February of this year. Take an opportunity. I can send you all the current special rules of order, and the next few days, just read them and think of things that always to improve.
Well, I think we can vote on this one right now. I'd make a motion for you to amend the special rules to remove the emergency aspect of it.
There's a motion. I'll second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. On the attorney's report, I think the clerk gave a great suggestion. Let's look at this holistically. Let's take a look at all of them, and I would love to see what Raul, what you have, Lorenzo, whatever recommendations you have on the special rules. I agree with you. If it's a norm among remember, these are our rules. We can kind of set the tone here. We know what the culture is. You guys know what the collegiality here. It's not that. It's a different time, and I think we can embrace that through the special rules. I, for one, am a big stickler on the vague memos. I have a hard time when I'm going through my briefings and the memos are so vague that the manager can't even explain them to me. So I know in the past we've tried to address this, but it does help because sometimes I get questions from the public, what is this about? And sometimes I'll call the manager and the manager has no idea because the only opportunity we have is that memo. So I don't know if that's something that we address through just through us, I guess.
I'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
I'll take a look at it. Maybe I'll come up with some requirements. We'll reach out to you before we do that, and maybe we'll collaborate a little bit on what those memos should
Yeah.
contain.
But thank you for the attorney's report, Mr. Gastesi. Seeing no other items on the agenda, I'm going to go ahead and call for adjournment. Thank you.